They let go of the one who loved them most. Now the avoidant suffers in silence. We often think the person who walks away is the one with the power, the one who seems unbothered, detached, in control. But sometimes the one who walks away isn't strong. They're scared. They didn't leave because they didn't care. They left because they didn't know how to receive the love they were being given. You see, some people have an avoidant attachment style. These are the people who grew up learning that closeness comes with conditions or with pain. So, as adults, they run from intimacy before it can hurt them. They crave connection but fear vulnerability, and then meet who sees them, who stays, who loves them without asking them to perform or protect or pretend. And for a moment, a rare moment, they have what they always needed. But that love starts to feel overwhelming, too real, too raw, too risky. So they push it away. They sabotage it. They rationalize their exit and they walk. Now here's the part we don't often talk about. They suffer too. Not publicly, not dramatically, but quietly, in the echo of missed texts. In the silence of a night they thought would feel free, but now just feels empty. The person they pushed away, they grieve, they heal, grow. But the avoidant, they often suffer in silence, because their pride won't let them reach out, their fear won't let them admit regret, and their patterns won't let them change until they choose to. So if you've ever been the one who loved deeply and lost someone to their own fear, don't confuse their silence with peace. Sometimes the loudest pain is the one no one hears. When someone with an avoidant attachment style leaves a relationship, it's easy to assume they didn't care, that they were indifferent, that your love just didn't mean enough to make them stay. But what most people don't realize is that avoidants don't walk away because they feel nothing. They walk away because they feel too much and don't know how to cope with it. For them, emotional closeness isn't comforting. It's threatening. It activates a survival instinct they've carried since childhood. Get close and you'll get hurt. These are the people who may have grown up in environments where their needs were dismissed or where love was given conditionally. If they behaved a certain way, achieved something, or kept quiet, over time they learned independence equals safety. Needing others became a weakness. Vulnerability became dangerous. So, when they grow up and meet someone who genuinely loves them, who sees past the facade and wants to connect on a deep level, they're drawn in, but also deeply afraid. At first, the relationship might feel like everything they've secretly longed for. Finally, someone is offering them real love, the kind that doesn't need to be earned with achievements or constant emotional self-control. But the moment that love becomes real, it triggers panic. This isn't about you not. It's not that they don't see the value in the person they're with. They often see it more than they'll ever admit. The problem is they don't believe they can safely hold it. The closer someone gets to their inner world, the more exposed they feel. That exposure is unbearable. So instead of leaning into the love, they start to pull away. They create distance. They say they need space. They stop responding as quickly. They pick fights over minor things. This is where the partner begins to question themselves. Did I do something wrong? Am I too much? But it was never about the partner being too much. It was about the avoidant feeling like they were losing control. Intimacy brings up all the unresolved fears they've buried, and instead of confronting those fears, they run, not because they don't care, but because caring terrifies them. The tragedy here is that their departure often looks like apathy. It looks calculated, but underneath that, there's a storm of internal conflict. Their nervous system is screaming for safety, and their brain is telling them distance equals control. So they walk, and the person they leave behind is left to carry not just their own heartbreak, but the confusion of being abandoned by someone they thought truly cared. In reality, the avoidant may have cared more than they were able to show, but their fear of closeness drowned out their capacity to stay. Understanding this doesn't excuse the pain they cause, but it explains it. And sometimes understanding is the first step toward healing. This isn't about not, because once you realize they didn't leave to a lack of love, but a lack of emotional tools, you stop questioning your own worth. Being loved unconditionally is one of the most beautiful experiences a person can have, but for someone with an avoidant attachment style, it can also be one of the most terrifying. To most people, real love feels safe, warm, and grounding, but for the avoidant, it feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. Unstable, vulnerable, and deeply unfamiliar. They crave connection just like anyone else, but when someone truly sees them, stays with them, and offers love without conditions, it can activate a fear they don't always understand or know how to express. This fear doesn't come out of nowhere. It's often rooted in early life experiences. Growing up in an environment where emotional needs weren't consistently met, or where affection came with strings attached. They may have learned to survive by becoming emotionally self-reliant, by minimizing their needs, by believing that depending on someone leads to disappointment or rejection. Over time, they came to associate love with loss, closeness with pain, and vulnerability with danger. So when someone comes along and offers them a different kind of love, the kind that says, you don't have to earn this, you don't have to hide, It shakes the foundation they've built their emotional world on. At first, they might be drawn in. Deep down, they want that love. They long for that feeling of being seen and accepted. But as the relationship deepens and that love becomes more consistent, something unsettling starts to happen inside them. It's not that the love itself is bad. It's that it's too pure, too raw, too confronting. It shines a light on parts of them they've spent years avoiding. Parts that say, "You're not enough," or if they really get close, they'll leave. Unconditional love challenges those beliefs. And for someone who's never felt emotionally safe, that challenge doesn't feel liberating. It feels destabilizing. So they do what they've always done when emotions become too intense. They retreat. They pull back. They put up walls. They tell themselves the other person is too needy or that the relationship is moving too fast. It's not that they don't feel the love. It's that they feel it too deeply and they don't trust themselves to handle it. They might even start to criticize or devalue the person loving them, not out of malice, but as a defense mechanism. If they can convince themselves the relationship isn't right, they don't have to face the terrifying idea that they might actually be worthy of love, but incapable of accepting it. This inner battle often goes unnoticed by the person on the other side. All they see is someone withdrawing, acting distant, or suddenly needing space. They might blame themselves, thinking they pushed too hard or cared too much. But the reality is the avoidant wasn't pushed away by pressure. They were pulled inward by fear. This isn't about you not. The love they were given was everything they needed and everything they weren't ready for. When someone pushes love away, it's natural to assume it's because the relationship wasn't right or because the love wasn't enough. But in many cases, especially with avoidant individuals, sabotaging love has very little to do with the partner and everything to do with self-protection. It's not that the love they received wasn't valuable, it's that it felt threatening to their emotional equilibrium. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, closeness is often equated with loss of control, vulnerability, or even emotional danger. So when intimacy deepens, the impulse isn't to embrace it, but to defend against it. This defense can take many forms. They might become critical, nitpicking things that never bothered them before. They may suddenly feel suffocated or start questioning whether they're really ready for a relationship. Often, they convince themselves that the connection is flawed, that the other person is too intense, too emotional, too available. But beneath all of that rationalizing is fear of being seen too clearly, fear of becoming dependent, fear of having something real to lose. And so they create distance, either emotionally or physically, before they feel that love has the chance to hurt them. What's important to understand is that this pattern of self-sabotage isn't about a lack of attraction or care. In fact, the more real the love becomes, the more the avoidance starts to panic. Because real love requires letting go of control. It asks a person to be open, to be known, to risk disappointment. That level of emotional exposure is overwhelming to someone who's learned to equate intimacy with unpredictability or pain. So they retreat, not because they don't see the value of their partner, but because they don't believe they can survive what closeness demands of them. In their mind, they're protecting themselves. They may even believe they're protecting the other person. That by leaving now, they're preventing a deeper hurt down the line. But the damage is already done. Because the partner, who likely offered nothing but genuine care and affection, is left feeling rejected and confused. They wonder why their love wasn't enough, when in truth, it may have been too much for someone who doesn't know how to receive it. This cycle often repeats, not just with one partner, but in relationship after relationship. Unless the avoidant becomes aware of their own patterns, they will continue to push away the very thing they most desire. And unless their partners understand this dynamic, they may internalize the rejection and question their own worth. So when someone sabotages a relationship that was built on mutual care and emotional availability, this isn't about a reflection of the other person's shortcomings. It's a reflection of the avoidant's unresolved fears. The love wasn't the problem. The problem was that they didn't yet feel safe enough to believe it could last, or that they were worthy of receiving it in the first place. When a relationship ends because someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, it can seem like they've moved on effortlessly. They don't show emotion. They don't reach out. They seem calm, detached, maybe even relieved. But what most people don't see is what happens behind the mask. The inner conflict, the regret, the sadness that rarely gets expressed. Avoidants often suffer in silence, not because they feel nothing, but because they don't know how to process what they feel, or they're too afraid to confront the emotional reality of what they've lost. Avoidantly attached individuals are often excellent at compartmentalizing their emotions. They've learned to do this from a young age as a way of surviving emotional environments that didn't feel safe or responsive. So when a meaningful relationship ends, their first instinct is to shut down, suppress, and move forward on the surface. They distract themselves with work, hobbies, casual interactions, anything that keeps them from sitting with the discomfort of vulnerability. On the outside, they seem fine. Inside, there is often a deep and painful void they don't feel equipped to explore. The truth is, avoidants often begin to miss their partner long after the relationship has ended. But because they struggle with emotional expression and introspection, that longing doesn't come out in the ways most people expect. This isn't about you not. They may find themselves thinking about the person late at night, scrolling through old messages, or wondering what could have been if they'd handled things differently. But instead of reaching out, they stay silent. Pride gets in the way. So does fear of rejection, of being vulnerable, of having to admit they made a mistake. They convince themselves that reaching out would be weak, that the other person has probably moved on, or that rekindling things would only expose them to more pain. So they stay quiet, even as the weight of their silence grows heavier. And because they never fully process the loss, it lingers. It haunts them in ways they don't talk about. This is the suffering no one sees. The quiet heartbreak of someone who pushed love away to protect themselves and now doesn't know how to bring it back. Ironically, while the person they left behind may go through a visible grieving process, crying, talking about it, seeking support, the avoidance grief is internal, delayed, and unresolved. That can be even more painful because it's isolating. They often don't allow themselves to mourn. They feel they don't have the right to, especially if they were the one who ended things. But grief doesn't care about fault. It comes anyway. Over time, that unspoken regret can build into something more complicated. A pattern of self-doubt, self-criticism, or cynicism about relationships in general. They tell themselves love never works out, or that no one really gets them, when in reality, they're still silently mourning the love they lost, but didn't know how to keep. When a relationship ends because of emotional distance or fear of intimacy, it's natural to assume the person who left is the one who has moved on first. From the outside, the avoidant often appears calm, composed, even unaffected. Meanwhile, the person who was left behind, often someone with a more secure, anxious attachment style, may be visibly heartbroken. They cry, talk to friends, seek support, journal their feelings, and process the loss openly. But what many people don't realize is that this outward display of pain is often what allows the healing to begin, while the avoidant silence can trap them in their own unresolved grief for much longer. The person who was left behind faces the heartbreak head-on. They might question their worth, replay conversations, try to understand what went wrong. It's painful, but it's also real. They are engaging with the emotional truth of the loss. And even though it hurts, that willingness to confront pain is what the tools to eventually let go, learn, grow. They may come out of the experience wiser, more self-aware, and with a clear sense of what they want and need in future relationships. The avoidant, on the other hand, often skips this stage. Their instinct is to suppress, to minimize, to move on without looking back. They tell themselves it wasn't that deep, or that the relationship wasn't right anyway. But this is a form of emotional self-protection, not resolution. By avoiding their feelings, they don't give themselves the chance to truly process what they lost. Instead, the grief lingers beneath the surface, showing up in unexpected ways: emotional numbness, difficulty connecting with new partners, or a persistent sense that something meaningful slipped through their fingers. Because they don't express their pain, it's easy for others, and even for themselves, to believe they're fine. But avoidance is not the same as peace. In fact, the person who doesn't allow themselves to grieve may end up carrying the emotional weight far longer. They may have moments of sudden longing, late-night thoughts about one they pushed away, flashes of regret when they see something that reminds them of what they had. And because they never fully engaged with the pain, those feelings stay unresolved. The irony is striking you not. The person who appeared the most devastated early on often recovers more quickly because they let the storm pass through. The person who seemed unaffected may suffer quietly for months or even years, unable to fully name what they're feeling. The avoidant silence isn't proof of healing. It's often a symptom of emotional avoidance, a strategy that protects in the short term but prevents true closure. And so, while the partner they left behind might eventually find peace, growth, and healthier love, the avoidant remains stuck in a cycle, craving connection but fearing it, missing what they had, but unsure how to reach for it again. It's not a lack of emotion that holds them back. It's the walls they built to survive, walls that now keep them from the very love they once ran from. Thank you for being here, for listening not just with your ears, with your heart. These conversations aren't always easy. They touch on wounds, regrets, and the parts of love that don't fit into fairy tales. But they matter, because the more we understand ourselves and each other, the better chance we have at building love that lasts. Whether you've been on the side of the one who stayed or the one who ran, I hope this gave you clarity, compassion, and maybe even the beginning of healing. Take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never be ashamed of loving deeply. Thank you, and goodbye.